In the decades following the Civil War, the United States transformed into an industrial powerhouse. This period, known as the Gilded Age, was marked by rapid economic growth, the rise of colossal corporations, and breathtaking technological innovation. But beneath the glittering surface lay sharp contrasts between wealth and poverty, opportunity and exploitation, prosperity and protest. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the standard of living, working conditions, child labor, and the emergence of organized labor during the Gilded Age. Let's get started. As huge corporations spread across the nation, most Americans saw their standard of living slowly begin to rise. While the rich continued to grow richer, many working class Americans found themselves better off than before. Real wages in manufacturing increased by about 50% between 1860 and 1890, and then again another 37% from 1890 to 1914. Falling prices and a lower cost of living gave workers access to new goods and services, raising overall quality of life. But this prosperity was unevenly distributed. The wealth gap remained enormous. In both 1860 and 1900, the richest 2% of American families owned more than a third of the nation's wealth. The top 10% owned nearly three-quarters. Rising wages masked a more dangerous reality. The working environment was hazardous and unforgiving. Factories lacked health and safety standards, and in 1913 alone, over 25,000 workers died on the job, and more than 700,000 suffered injuries that kept them disabled for at least a month. Despite leading the world in workplace accidents, the United States had no workers' compensation system. Unskilled laborers toiled alongside machines, often reduced to mere cogs in the vast industrial system. Factory life was impersonal. Unlike small workshops of the past, most workers never met their employers. Instead, they worked under distant bureaucracies where ownership was far removed from management. Among the saddest realities of the Gilded Age was the rise of child labor. After the Civil War, increasing numbers of children became full-time wage laborers. By 1880, 1 in 6 children in the United States was working. By 1900, nearly 2 million were a part of the labor force. These children operated dangerous machinery, worked in mines, stitched garments, peeled shrimp, and tended looms, often 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Many started as young as 8 years old. Desperate families had little choice. Children working in coal mines in Appalachia or textile mills in New England were sometimes kept awake by foremen who would splash them with water. Children were 3 times more likely than adults to suffer job-related injuries. Those who worked in textile mills were only half as likely to reach the age of 20 as their peers who didn't. By 1881, just 7 states, mostly in New England, had child labor laws requiring a minimum age of 12, and even then, enforcement was weak or non-existent. Faced with long hours, dangerous conditions, and stagnant wages, workers struggled to fight back, but organizing labor was no easy task. Civic leaders prioritized property rights over labor rights, and many industrialists viewed laborers as commodities to be purchased cheaply. Furthermore, the workforce was made up of immigrants from diverse backgrounds, which often divided them by language and ethnicity. Still, workers staged spontaneous protests, and sometimes violence erupted. One of the earliest examples of labor militancy was the case of the Molly Maguires, an Irish secret society operating in the coal fields of western Pennsylvania. Driven by unsafe working conditions, they resorted to violence and even murder against coal operators. By 1876, after intense crackdowns and infiltration by the Pinkerton detectives, 24 Molly Maguires were convicted and 10 were hanged. Far more widespread was the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, the first major interstate labor strike in American history. Triggered by wage cuts following the Panic of 1873, workers in Martinsburg, West Virginia just simply walked off the job. Soon, unrest spread from Maryland to San Francisco. Rioters burned rail property and violence engulfed hundreds of towns and cities. Over 100 people were killed and millions in property were destroyed. Federal troops eventually quelled the violence, and one reporter even called it the most horrible event ever witnessed, except in the carnage of war. Public opinion largely blamed the workers for the destruction. A Pittsburgh newspaper warned this may be the beginning of a great civil war in this country between labor and capital. For many Americans, the strike raised the terrifying prospect of worker-led revolution. Yet, for labor organizers, the strike revealed the potential power of union solidarity and underscored the need for better coordination. Out of this unrest emerged America's first truly national labor organizations. Founded in 1869 by Uriah S. Stevens, the Knights of Labor welcomed nearly anyone who toiled, including women, African Americans, and even some professionals. They fought for an 8-hour workday and the abolition of child labor, but their greater goal was a broad restructuring of the economy. Under Terence V. Powderly, membership surged from 100,000 to over 700,000 in the 1880s. But in 1886, the Haymarket Square riot in Chicago changed everything. What began as a peaceful rally for an 8-hour workday turned deadly when someone threw a bomb at police. Officers opened fire into the crowd and dozens were killed or injured. Although no direct link was proven, rumors spread that the Knights of Labor were behind it. Fears of anarchy and revolution grew. Public trust in the Knights collapsed, and by 1893, the organization was dissolved. In the wake of the Knights' decline, a new force rose, the American Federation of Labor, founded by Samuel Gompers in 1886. The AFL focused on skilled workers, forming craft unions to advocate for specific trades. Unlike the Knights, the AFL avoided politics and pushed for concrete gains, like higher wages, shorter hours, and closed shops. Gompers practiced collective bargaining, using negotiation instead of confrontation. And because his members were skilled workers, they couldn't be easily replaced, giving the union stronger leverage. Despite these efforts, the federal government consistently sided with big business. In 1892, when steelworkers at Carnegie's Homestead plant went on strike, manager Henry Clay Frick hired 300 Pinkerton agents to break it. After a bloody exchange of gunfire, 9 strikers and 7 Pinkertons died. The state militia was then sent in to crush the strike, and they did so successfully. A year later, Pullman workers went on strike after a 25% wage cut. With support from Eugene V. Debs and the American Railway Union, rail traffic across the country ground to a halt. President Grover Cleveland intervened. The courts issued an injunction against the strike, and Debs was arrested. Then, in 1895, the Supreme Court ruled in re Debs that courts could issue injunctions against strikes if interstate commerce was affected. This ruling effectively gave employers permission to ignore union demands and continue operations without negotiation. By the end of the 19th century, America stood on the cusp of becoming a global industrial power, but the price of progress was steep. Child labor, dangerous working conditions, and violent clashes defined an era when millions toiled with little protection. And yet out of this struggle, a movement began, one that would shape the rights, protections, and dignities of workers for generations to come. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.